You're listening to Love Noir, presented by Congo Square Theater Company.
Welcome to Congo Square Theater's Love Noir, a podcast dedicated to conversations on Black love amongst theater makers. I am your host, Tracey Bonner, creator of Date Yourself Girl, and as a single woman who is also an artist, I have always wanted to get into the minds of couples in the arts and learn more about what makes them want to sustain their relationships in such a time that promotes relationship instability. So join me on this journey of love, relationships, art, and how the three intertwine. This is Love Noir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Monifa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Will, and we are the Sins.
Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the harm or some of the triggers or traumatizing emotional scars that you all may have left with? Because I know leaving my university, they tried to strip my Blackness away from me. How did you provide each other support, and how do you continue to provide each other support when you're in spaces where it's not a lot of us?
Yeah, good question.
I think my experience might be a little different from Monifa's graduating class because the majority of my classmates were African American. We were the first class that they brought in because they wanted to be diverse. So out of the 9, I think 6 or 7 of us that were African American. So to me, they had to come into our space. We were the first to introduce them to doing August Wilson, doing Pearl Clegg, all that. So I felt comfortable. Then coming from a HBCU, it was like an easy transition because the majority of my classmates were African American. So I absolutely loved it.
For me, it was a little interesting because I went to a PWI for undergrad. Yeah. There is kind of what you felt is what I felt coming from undergrad as well, which is why I felt like, let me go to grad school and really learn a little bit more about this craft, because I felt like I didn't get that in undergrad. My undergrad experience was very different. It wasn't that I felt like I was stripped. I felt ignored is what I felt in undergrad. I felt completely ignored, even though there were a couple of resources for us. Outside of those couple of resources, those couple of programs they had outside of that, there was like no space for us. So like when I would do shows there, it was never a leading lady role. I remember my one girlfriend who got a role. It was like the only leading role by a person of color that I can recall being there for years. So outside of the other school programs where you go and do those performances at school, I just felt ignored. It's funny too, because the college is in Detroit, and you would think in a predominantly minority diverse city that it would be different. And it wasn't. It was not. When I stepped on that college campus, I was culture shocked the opposite way, right? Going into a predominantly white institution, coming from a predominantly Black high school that was a very artsy high school. I kind of retreated a little bit as well because I was like, I don't know where my place is here. And I was even contemplating transferring to a HBCU when I was around my junior year. And somebody was like, Monifa, don't do that. You're going to prolong your education. Just get out and maybe go to grad school. And that's why I think by the time I got to grad school, I had that kind of fearlessness that Will talked about, because I knew what I did not want to experience again.
You can lean on them. They were the shoulder to lean on, to cry on, and they were like your surrogate parents.
Yeah, they
were
took
great care of us.
Amazing. Yeah. So I was really lucky when I came into it because that was already established, and they were making a conscious effort to diversify this program. Yeah. And so half of my class were people of color as well.
Hi, I'm Kelvin Roston Jr.
And I'm Alexis J. Roston. And we're the Rostons.
You all work all the time. You work all over this country. I've seen it, okay? I've watched your careers. But being a Black actor in white spaces can at times cause harm and leave traumatizing emotional and mental scars. How do you provide support for your partner, your friend, in these times?
For me, we've gone through that together. We've been in the same process where we've experienced a hardship being in a PWI, and we've had our own separate experiences with it. We allow each other space to vent and get that out our system. If we got to holler and scream, fuss and cuss, we allow each other that because it's not an attack on either of ourselves. It is the only outlet that I have to get this up off of me. And I'm doing it with the person I'm closest to that I trust to do this with. So giving space to do that, also giving space to make everything safe again, where it's been raucous and explosive. Everybody being mindful of where we got to get back to. We got to get back to ground zero. And then listening. Listening is something that we have had to learn over the years. That didn't come easy either. And like listening was hard. And I love to witness the growth in us because I know where we came from. And to see where we are now in our conversations, man, marriage is dope.
Hello, I'm Aaron Todd Douglas.
Hi, I'm Ann Joseph Douglas.
And we are the
Douglases.
Douglases.
So talk to me a little bit about being a Black actor in white spaces. Oftentimes, it can cause us some harm and it can leave some traumatizing scars. I went to the theater school at DePaul. You all went to
University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
These are predominantly white spaces. And then you graduate and go to Chicago, and all of these white institutions are there. Talk to me a little bit about those mental scars that you all experienced and why that sparked you to start Congo Square Theater Company.
So the idea to start Congo Square Theater Company did not lie with the two of us. It was Derek Sanders and Reggie Nelson who met at Howard, and they came up with this idea. The passion of those two speaking about the theater and the importance of having a space for Black actors got all of us excited. And so we moved to Chicago with the knowledge we were going to do this together. So I had this idea of the type of actor I was based off of the white gaze and based off of white casting directors, white stories, right? So I was plucky, I was not an ingenue, all of these different things. I believe it was the second season of Congo Square. I did 2 shows that season, and I played my first ingenue role. That was a Black woman. And I remember the moment being on stage going, holy f***, I am an ingenue. And so to have that space where you can, and it was in Playboy of the West Indies, where you can be wanted, beautiful, young, and then also plucky and sassy and all of these other things, but you're that based off of a Black playwright, Black director, Black cast. I don't think I realized until I was in the Black space what I was missing.
Same.
I was doing a show at the Steppenwolf and there were 2 Black actors in it. And I remember feeling so lost and alone because my people weren't with me. My Congo fam wasn't there. That's the feeling, that loneliness that I think a lot of white people don't understand because they're always invited and welcome and heard and valued in spaces.
Yeah.
My journey was a bit different. For me, my Blackness was always part of it. Like the first thing that I got excited about when I really started thinking like, I could do this. I discovered piano lesson in undergrad and I was like, whoa, and learning Charles Dutton's story and I was just knocked out. I was like, okay, that was the first monologue I really learned and studied. And I linked up with another brother, an older brother, Russ McKenzie, who I joined in grad school after we studied together in undergrad. And we used to do our own thing. You know, we used to feed ourselves. It's like, if you want something in this world, you have to go get it for yourself. So by the time we met and we started working together, and I was really focused by the time I was in graduate school. And I had done all these other things that were serving somebody else's culture in grad school. And my final year, we had Timothy Douglas come in and direct us in Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And so we auditioned and everything. Everybody called me back and they go into a room and they do some horse trading. They figure out where they're going to cast you. I was like, hey, this is my last year here. I hear what you're trying to do. I'm not for that. I will be in Joe Turner one way or another. If he doesn't choose to cast me, which is his right, I will fetch coffee. I will sweep the floor. But I'm going to be in this room because that was my only opportunity in my 3 years of graduate school to be in a Black space with a professional Black director. I was really adamant about that kind of thing. So By the time we started talking about Congo Square, I was like, yeah, that's part of my story. Not the entire story, but absolutely part of my story. I wanted to be able to work in whatever spaces I wanted to, but my home is going to be Black theater. I wanted that versatility. I wanted that flexibility, but home is where the heart is.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm hearing listeners that having a safe space to create and hone your craft is important as a Black artist. And also realizing that you are an advocate for the kind of art you want to create is super, super important. I think a lot of Black artists, we don't realize that early on. And hearing you say that early on in your careers, that you were doing that for me is inspiring, and it should be inspiring for you listeners.
What's up, everybody? My name is Jocelyn Banks.
And my name is Wesley J. Barnes, and we are the Banks Barneses.
Hey.
We don't always have the luxury of working at a Congo Square Theater Company, Kenny Leon's True Colors, or St. Louis Black Rep. We don't always have the luxury of working in spaces where we are represented. Being a Black actor in a white space, it can cause harm and leave some traumatizing emotional and mental scars. Now, how do you all provide support for your partner during these times?
Jesus, that's very, very real and seem to be getting any easier, honestly. I think for me, the biggest thing that I try to remember is that I need to always remain open and responsive to what he is saying to me. And I try to make sure that I always ask how a rehearsal day is gone or how a show day is gone, just to provide the space and opportunity for him to open up and share those things with me if and when they do need to be shared. Oftentimes, I feel like for me, I just need someone to listen and to hear me and let me know that, like, oh, you're not crazy in that moment. Yes, you did experience microaggression. Yes, you did experience this or that, just so that I don't feel alone in those instances, because especially when we're in predominantly white spaces, it's very easy to fall back and just be quiet about those instances because you don't want to become a problem or because you don't want to create any type of atmosphere that's not necessarily conducive for the environment you guys are trying to create. But I think that it's just too important to create space for us to be able to have those conversations. And if we can't have those at home, I think that something's wrong, you know?
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest things that I appreciate that we've carved out is like check-ins. And that's like a daily practice. But we check in with each other at the end of the day or whenever we both get home, whether that's in the physical or while we're distant. We just have a check-in where we talk to each other about our day, and we really just create the space to be able to be vulnerable and completely transparent about what we're dealing with. Sometimes we know because it's like a carryover from days past. Sometimes it's day-to-day and specific, but I feel like that's one of the things that helps me the most when I'm away. It's just like knowing that even if I'm not in an environment where I feel like I can be my fullest self, or like I feel like I don't have anyone to chat with about how I'm feeling and what I'm going through, I have him to be able to talk to at the end of the day.
Hey, I'm Tam.
I'm Kelvin.
And we are the Perry Douglases.
Being a Black actor in white spaces can at times cause us traumatizing emotional scars, mental scars. Talk to me a little bit about being in these white spaces, because we don't just do Black shows at Black theaters. Talk to me a little bit about how you provide support for your partner, because what you guys have been speaking about is partnership, really. I found my equal. I found my partner. So talk to me a little bit about supporting each other in those spaces.
I think we're very good about working through it. Like, so if she comes home from rehearsal or I come home from rehearsal and there's some issue, we talk about what happened. The conversation for me is usually like, where was I wrong in this? Like, what could I have done differently? I might not come out and say that, but the curiosity and the digging of it, clearly I want to know what my part was in it. Mm-hmm. Was I crazy in this moment? And then we find a way to deal with it. I think Tam is very good at dealing with those situations in the moment. So it's often she's coming in the aftermath. Like, she's like, oh, I dealt with it, but here's what happened. Whereas I'm still contemplating, should I have?
Girl, he gonna write a book about it first. He gonna write somebody an email. He gonna be sending me an email from the other room telling me about it. And I'm gonna be like, that could have been handled last week. But I wanna say this about me specifically. I don't walk into those spaces with anything. If something happens, then we go from there. But I don't walk in with a guard up and expectation that things are gonna go insane. I don't do that. Now, when they do, like he said, I am most of the time gonna handle it with dignity on the spot. And then we're gonna come home, we're gonna talk about how we handled it or if it was handled the right way. And if there's something further that we need to do, we will discuss it together and we go ahead and handle it.
I need to adopt your grace because I go into every predominantly white space looking for it. Okay, here I am. When is it going to happen? And how am I going to have to hold my mule? So I'm going to have to adopt some of that.
Yeah, work on that because I think sometimes that really clouds our judgment and what can be an amazing experience because we are looking for that because we have had really jacked up experiences in the past, not specifically with theater, but in college. You know, I went to University of Rochester, white liberal arts college in Rochester, New York. I mean, and also DePaul. All I'm saying is as I've gotten older and more mature in my life and my journey, I really try not to walk into spaces carrying something. I just come in open. And then if something happens, then it has to get handled.
I lived in Texas, so my what's the word?
You're such and such meter.
right. Mine is jacked. Because I'm like, well, it's not Texas, so right. You know, I had a lot of that when I came to Chicago. But over the years, I was like, oh, right, it's just as bad here in some ways. And I give people grace, but yeah, the moment they say something crazy or something that, okay, that's
and you know, he a baby Stokely Carmichael. He Canadian, but have you seen his plays? This is like a little baby black Canadian Panther, okay? It just takes him a little bit more time to process what happens.
Hi, I'm Ramon Rami. And I'm Saquon Myers. And we're listening to and participating in Love Noir.
You all came up during the civil rights movement. You all created institutions for Black artists. What can you say to Black actors, Black couples in particular, who are in the arts, who are working in these white spaces about their mental scars? What does support look like for them?
First of all, I say get over it. That's the first thing. And recognize what your purpose is. Your purpose is not to go into a white institution and to assume that they're going to change that institution to accommodate you. Your responsibility is to create an environment in which your purpose, your creativity comes out and touches those institutions and changes them in different ways. Now, this is why I say get over it. Well, a lot of us know Oscar Micheaux, and we know him as the first developing Black filmmaker. He did over 40 films in the 1930s, 1940s. What's most interesting about that is that this man developed 40 films 54 years after slavery. How do you do that? How do you do that where discrimination is still happening, Jim Crow is still happening, still didn't have theaters? This man got his camera, got his stuff, made his movie, went around the country, set it up, and made it happen. We still are functioning around being patted on the head and accepted rather than creating that which is most beneficial to us. And in creating our stories, it gives other people an opportunity to see love and to eliminate their own levels of racism that will not allow them to see in us what we have allowed them to show us of them.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. I'm not gonna lie, I struggle with getting over it as a Black artist. Because oftentimes I'm going in these spaces because I'm not a producer or a director or a writer. So I'm beholden to some of these institutions and the way they run it.
But you're not, Tracey. You're beholding to go into those institutions, gain what you can, and come back and build your own. That is the lesson of our ancestors. Our folks coming out of slavery put their pennies together and built churches. Our artists, and Maseko can speak to this more eloquently about what they did, the artists coming out of Southside Community Arts Center.
Well, I think personally, to answer and reflect on your question, Tracey, I would say that we don't understand that we have a lot more strength and creativity than we realize. And I started out as an actor, and I did eventually spread and develop my directing skills, my producing skills, because it was necessary for me to show that we will never be whole as an actor if we are allowing ourselves to be judged by people who don't know us, who have different value systems than we have, who are just different culturally. And I'm trying to push myself into that arena. And it's just not comfortable and just doesn't work. And so what we decided as a couple, again, talking and communicating and dealing with philosophy, is the fact that we would create spaces where people can come back to and charge themselves, their soul, their being, because they've been being beat down so much in the industry.
I'm Michelle Renee Bester.
I am Jessica Moore.
And this is
Love NOIR.
We work in Black spaces a lot now. Being a Black artist in white spaces, it can be stressful. It can cause some traumatizing emotional and mental scars. Have you ever experienced that? And if so, in this relationship, how have you supported each other?
We communicate quite often. And so there is a clear line, an open line, where no matter the topic, I know that I can come home and Jessica is my calm in the storm. So even when I am in the midst of dealing with foolishness elsewhere, I can send a text, I can make a phone call, and she helps me to bring forth what's most important. Why do you do this? It's a constant reminder of why do you do this and not allow the distractions to affect your path. And yeah, just open communication is really big. And her, like I said before, being my calm, this mind is going a million miles a minute. Jessica knows how to halt everything and we get back to a healthy speed, which is really, really helpful for me, especially in certain spaces.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, y'all, I'm single as a dollar bill. But the thing I wish I had was a support system because I'm often working in PWIs, you know, in an educational setting or if it's in the theater or on set. And I don't have that support coming home. So I think that is key. Michelle, what you're saying is being able to have that person I can text or call or just have that listening ear because it's hard when you're in a space where you're the only one or the only two.
Ooh, yeah.
And I love to hear that you offer that support.
Hi there, listeners. I'm Deanna Griffin-Irons.
And I'm Anthony Leon.
And
together we are
DNA.
DNA.
Being a Black actor in white spaces, sometimes it can cause harm and leave traumatizing emotional and mental scars. We've all been there. So how do you provide support for your partner in those trying times? I mean, we work at these theaters across the country and we might be the only ones or one or two in admin. And so how do you support each other?
Second City had several touring companies that they would use as vehicles to introduce incoming artists who were interested in being on the main stage. So they had these touring companies that would go out and they differentiated them with different colors. There was the red code, there was the blue code, there was, I think, green code. You may have a smattering of people of color in each one, but when Deanna came along, it's like, hey, you know what? We need an ensemble of rich, diverse talent. We're gonna call them brown code.
But the name was affectionately titled by the ensemble, by agreement of the ensemble, not the institution saying, hey, we're going to call all the Black people brown co. So just want to kind of clear that up because that's a distinction.
Dealing with whatever you want to call it, microaggressions or misunderstandings as artists of color. Deanna and I talk constantly about like what just went down, how you feel. Our sons are getting more and more into the industry just in school, you know, and so things come up that just require conversations of what's happening, what you think the person is doing, who is in the institution, how did you respond, do we need to do follow-ups? And so we are in constant communications of what's happening, what we think is happening, and We're always ready to throw in some jokes and keep it light.
Yeah.
We can't take ourselves or this world or this work even so serious that everything is doom and gloom and we're walking around with frowns on our faces.
I just want to add on to that, Tracey. I think that has always been my saving grace coming from a world of comedy. And I've been into some very harsh conditions with my backstory and had to push through some really hard levels of oppression. So comedy was a saving grace and was the way that I built my resistance and my resilience.
Hey y'all, I'm Roxana.
And I'm Ron. We are the Connors. That's
CONNER.
Please and thank you.
I went to an HBCU. Ron, you went to one. Roxana, did you go to an HBCU?
Clark Atlanta University.
Oh, wow. So we're all HBCU alums. I just want to talk a little bit about being a Black actor in a white space. Oftentimes, we go into these spaces and we the only one, or it's only a couple of us. And sometimes it could leave us some traumatizing emotional and mental scars. Now, how do you all provide support for one another while you're in these spaces?
I think we already know, having been alums of HBCUs, we already come with a center that I think everybody doesn't always come from, but they haven't had that experience. So when I walk into the room, I belong in the room, right? It doesn't matter whose room it is. And I think we both come from that approach. So that's the first part. You know, I'm in a white space, but okay, you're going to have to deal with me in this white space, right? But in terms of the things that we've experienced, I mean, I went through a pretty traumatic situation a few years ago when I decided to leave Victory Gardens and everything that was going on there. And Ron was my biggest supporter. He said, take as much time as you need, do what you need to do. But sometimes it's also, Tracey, just coming home and being like, you ain't gonna believe what these white folks did today. You don't believe what she said to me today or how she operated today and what I had to deal with. And it's like the Chris Rock joke where he says, I knew that was crazy. It's that kind of thing where we just operate in that way for one another and also give each other the space that we need to process ourselves when we need to do that.
I'm in Henry V at Chicago Shakespeare right now. We close on Sunday. And I realized doing this that this was the first time I had been in a white space in a long time since like the pandemic, like where it was a mix. I worked at Chicago Shakespeare before. I just done 12 Night, but that was almost an all Black cast with a Black director. This was different. And not only was the director white, he was British. And so it was a huge cultural difference, and we're doing Henry V. And this is what I mean by I lean on Roxana, like she just knows more. She knew the play better than I did, and the character in the play, my character, gets hung. And she was like, well, how are you all gonna do that? Because a Black man getting hung in America, that's gonna be problematic. It wasn't even on my radar. But her bringing that to my attention put me in a space of, okay, well, how am I gonna handle this? And her and I talked through it. And then, you know, it was really just an easy conversation with the director off to the side, not a big moment. He was like, oh, he hadn't thought about it. And we came up with a way to do the scene that was just as good, if not more visceral, without taking the audience out of the play by seeing a noose around a Black man's neck.
With that said, this concludes this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. I am your host, Tracey Bonner, and I look forward to bringing you more conversations about the arts and love. Noir. See you next time. Love Noir was created by Congo Square Ensemble member Alexis J. Roston. Music by Kelvin Roston Jr. Editing by Brendan Reed.